it would put beyond reasonable doubt that those people were in that house and had contact with the deceased. In any case, may I take all of us back to the particulars of the charge? They say, jointly charged with others not before the court. I say no more. But finally, before I move out of that area, the question that we must ask ourselves is, does the fact that there may have been other people who are still at large exonerate the first accused person from blame? My answer was in the negative. Was the first accused person the last person to be seen with the deceased? The doctrine of last seen was discussed in the case of Kimani versus Republic, where the Court of Appeal said this, and I will read it because it's important. The doctrine of last seen alive is based on circumstantial evidence where the law prescribes that the person last seen with the deceased before their death was responsible for his or her death, and the accused is expected to provide an explanation as to what happened. In the Nigerian case of Achi versus Tet, 1993, the court relied on the case of Eastman versus Tet to discuss the doctrine of last seen. And this is what the court said, and I quote, "In the case of culpable homicide, as is in the present one, where the doctrine of last seen has been applied, the law presumes that the person last seen with the deceased before the death was responsible for his death, and the accused is expected to provide an explanation of what happened." The last seen doctrine stands as negation. I will repeat again. The doctrine of last seen stands as a negation and an exception to the doctrine of presumption of innocence. It is therefore tried law that where a victim was last seen by the accused and is found dead, the death of the victim will be presumed, and it will be presumed that the last person he was last seen with is responsible for his death. Therefore, if the first accused person is the one who was last seen with the deceased herein, as testified by Lee Owen, then the first accused person will have the burden to explain what happened to the deceased. Please have a look at the case of Achbong versus Tet, 2006, LCN. You'll find it in my judgment. It is the finding of this court that the first accused person was in the deceased house on the material date, and he was the last person to be seen with the deceased. The evidence of the protected witness is that Harun, whom he identified on the parade as the first accused person, left that house at 23, that's about 11, and no one else went to that house. It is the evidence of this witness the deceased Sudanese boyfriend was not in Kenya. And there is evidence that this deceased person was supposed to be traveling the following day to go to Dubai to meet the Sudanese boyfriend on business and holiday. The next issue I'm considering at this point is whether the first accused person had a gun on the material date and whether he used it to subdue the deceased. May I have a little more water? The evidence of Brian Kasaine's Spira, corroborated by the evidence of no other person than the first accused person himself, is that by 19th of September 2018, the first accused person was in possession of a gun. That gun belongs to Brian Kasaine Spira. And so, it is undisputed that on 19th of September, the first accused person was in possession of a gun belonging to Kasaine, PW17. In fact, Kasaine testified that the first accused person had earlier on borrowed this gun to go on what he said a refresher training, returned it, and then he borrowed it again. And according to Kasaine, and this is important, he was supposed to return that gun after 2 days, but he did it. And so, by 19th September, he had a gun. That corroborates the evidence of Jennings that when they left Roadhouse, the first accused person opened the dashboard of the car and removed the gun after putting a white council on top of his cloth and picked a taxi and went where he was going. And so the question is this: if he was armed with a gun and the gun was not used to kill the deceased, what was it for? I am in concurrence with the submissions by the prosecution that the gun was intended and used for the purposes of subduing the deceased. I'll quickly move to the identification parade. The identification parade was conducted by Chief Inspector Arama. Again, I'm fast tracking, so I'll not go through the rules of a parade.